This year marks half a century since the storied singer of the Doors, Jim Morrison, met his untimely death. Or at least that's what most reasonable people believe happened, due to a combination of denial, wishful thinking, and some eagerly promoted conspiracy theories. However, some people believe that Morrison still lives. According to the Doors guitarist Robby Krieger, that's just one of many outrageous myths, misconceptions, or outright lies that have clung to the band's story. In order to represent his version of setting the record straight, then Krieger has just published a memoir, Set the Night on Fire, Living, Dying, and Playing Guitar with the Doors. It's a doorstop-thick attempt to retell an oft-told tale, this time informed by a desire to suck the hot air out of the more inflated earlier versions, aided by a hilariously flipped tone that makes this late-arriving history perhaps the most reliable, and certainly the most entertaining of all. The witty prose fashioned by co-author Jeff Alulis stands in marked contrast to the bitter tone of the two memoirs by the band's drummer John Densmore, the second of which focused on his protracted lawsuit against the two other surviving members of the band, as well as the pedantic and at times pretentious tone of the published reminiscences of keyboardist Ray Manzarek. Krieger's tome also aims to blow holes in the mega-selling 1980 book on Morrison, No One Here Gets Out Alive, as well as Oliver Stone's bloviated 1991 movie, The Doors, which Krieger takes down in an entire mocking chapter. To the guitarist, Stone's movie wins the prize for fostering the single most outrageous fallacy. Krieger said, "The scene in the film where Jim supposedly pushes a fan into a closet and sets it on fire is the worst. That is ridiculously untrue." At the same time, Krieger's version of the story hardly wants for drama or lunacy. Here's what happens in just the first 3 pages. Morrison proclaims himself God and threatens to throw Krieger right out of the universe. Minutes later, during a dinner, Morrison comes on to the wife of the band's producer, and then, as they're all tensely driving back to their hotel, he grabs the steering wheel, held by said producer, and swerves directly into oncoming traffic, after somehow making it back to the hotel alive. Morrison runs up to his room on the 12th floor and proceeds to dangle his body out of the window while stone-drunk and stark naked, before leaping back into the room at the last minute to grab Krieger's crotch and pin him down on the bed for an unsolicited dry hump. It helped that they were all incredibly young at the time. Krieger was just 19 in late 1965 when he joined the other 3 members who had begun trying to find a sound 6 months earlier. Krieger may have come to the band with what he calls the worst hair in rock and roll, but he had already developed a distinct and sophisticated guitar style, informed by a love of flamenco music and John Coltrane's jazz. On the other hand, Krieger said that Morrison hadn't yet developed the commanding voice he would later become famous for. Jim had never sung before, and your singing muscles need time to develop. It didn't take long, but vocally Jim became a 95 on a scale of 100 after starting as a 10. His voice became a weapon. In considering such behavior now, the guitarist said, "I think Jim had some real mental issues, manic depression or whatever." He also believes he had issues with his parents. Whenever the press would ask about his family, he would say that they were dead. His mom was weird, she was very bossy, but he was fixated on her. In fact, that fraught relationship informed one of Morrison's most famous lyrics, his Oedipal outburst in the end, in which he shouts about killing his father and having sex with his mother. In the book, Krieger writes that the other band members had no idea that part of the song was coming the first time Morrison introduced it during an improvised section of a show at the Whiskey A Go-Go in Hollywood. Krieger said, "The first time I heard it, I didn't even know what he was talking about. It wasn't until we recorded it that Jim talked about why he put it in there. He would never tell us what his lyrics were about. He'd say you have to interpret the words, but this time he went on and on about it. I never met anyone who had such an Oedipus complex, that he writes a song about it, and then talks about it. Most people don't even realize they have it." Krieger believes Morrison's ability to create such frank, outrageous, and spontaneous moments is what made the Doors live shows so vital and real. He said, "When people saw us play, they knew that this wasn't just a show. There was no difference between Jim on stage and off. I'm pretty sure Iggy Pop doesn't roll around in glass in between trips to the supermarket, and I doubt Hendrix ever set his guitar on fire just to keep warm. The magic of Jim was that he was just Jim." Another mischaracterization concerns Morrison's nom de persona, the Lizard King, which came from a lyric in the song Not to Touch the Earth. The line was meant to refer to a character in the song, not the singer. He asserts that the singer's weight gain later in his career wasn't a willful attempt to sabotage his rock god image. The girth came from his escalating alcoholism, a voracious appetite for food, as well as his natural tendency to pack on the pounds. In a related story, Krieger said that Morrison's move to Paris in 1971 wasn't about getting away from his rock career so he could be taken more seriously as a poet. In fact, the guitarist said Morrison felt the band had revitalized itself with the album they cut shortly before his death, L.A. Woman. That album will be honored with a 50th anniversary edition out this month, containing some never-before-heard alternate studio versions of the album's classics. Krieger, who wrote the core of many of the band's best-known songs from Light My Fire to Love Her Madly, considers L.A. Woman to be the best Doors album since their debut 4 years earlier. He believes that has to do with the fully collaborative nature of the writing and the more spontaneous nature of the playing and recording, encouraged by their engineer-turned-producer Bruce Botnick. After Morrison's death, the remaining Doors considered other singers to replace him, though not Iggy Pop, as has long been rumored. They coveted Joe Cocker and Paul Rodgers, though they never made offers to either. Instead, they recorded 2 albums on their own, which Krieger believes may have been too many. After the surviving 3 members finally admitted defeat, Krieger continued to record with new bands, yet a growing depression, rooted in his realization that his career had peaked when he was just 25, led him into a heroin addiction that took years to beat. In the book, he details that time and connects it to other personal problems in his life, including his mother's long history of pill addiction and his twin brother's mental illness, which led to an early and still mysterious death. A painful part of the book deals with drummer Densmore's suits against Krieger and Manzarek after they tried to tour under the band's original name in the early aughts. Contentious as that period was, Krieger said that he and Densmore later became friendly again, spurred by Manzarek's death from cancer in 2013.